Your mother is nothing. Victoria Langley's voice cut sharply across the high-ceilinged mansion, echoing off the marble floors and gilded walls. Emma Carter paused just inside the doorway, her hands lightly clutching the letter her mother had left, heart beating fast but face composed, as a cold silence fell over the room. Every guest at the lavish gathering turned toward her, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed judgment, the glint of crystal glasses and silver cutlery reflecting the soft chandelier light. Emma's eyes scanned the room, noting the subtle shifts in posture and the whispers that rippled like a current through the crowd. She took a careful step forward, feeling the polished hardwood under her shoes, and lifted the letter just enough for the edges to catch the light, the faint crinkle of the paper audible in the tense hush. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and perfume, a stark contrast to the pounding of her heart, each beat a reminder of the courage her mother had instilled in her. "I know what you see," Emma began, her voice low but clear, slicing through the heavy quiet. "But my mother's worth isn't measured by gossip or appearances." Victoria's smirk faltered, the corners of her mouth twitching, a single brow arched in skepticism. Emma stepped closer, her movements deliberate, steady, as if each measured inch carried the weight of her mother's legacy. The guests leaned in, silent now, caught between fascination and disbelief. Emma let the letter fall onto the marble table with a gentle thud that seemed to punctuate the gravity of her words. She straightened, shoulders back, chin slightly raised, letting the room settle around her like a held breath. Her gaze met Victoria's, unwavering and calm, challenging the dismissive power that had filled the space just moments before. A faint shuffle echoed from behind Victoria, a guest picking up on the details of the letter, eyes widening subtly, as Emma's words seemed to anchor the truth between them. The soft light glimmered off gold picture frames and crystal ornaments, painting the scene in a cinematic glow, every movement and shadow amplified in the tension. Emma spoke again, slightly louder, carefully choosing each word. "Everything you think you know about her, about our family, is written here, plain as day. She built this. She saved it. She gave us all this life through her determination and vision." The murmurs rose, low and uncertain, as guests began to digest the revelation, the air thick with anticipation. Victoria's lips pressed together, her hands gripping the arms of her chair, the power in her posture wobbling for the first time. Emma held her gaze, breathing even. The quiet calm she projected a stark contrast to the shocked whispers and soft footsteps around her. Each moment stretched, cinematic, the chandelier above catching specks of light that danced across polished surfaces, emphasizing the shift in energy. The room seemed to collectively lean toward Emma, waiting, watching, caught in the unfolding reversal. And though nothing had been shouted or dramatically gestured, the truth had begun to pivot the power, and every eye now lingered on Victoria, whose confidence teetered as the subtle weight of Emma's calm courage settled firmly in the space, leaving an unspoken question hanging in the air. What would happen next, now that the quiet truth had started to rewrite the mansion's story? The room remained still, the soft glow from the crystal chandelier catching the delicate curves of the furniture as Emma Carter's steady gaze met Victoria Langley's faltering expression. The guests shifted slightly, some leaning forward, their whispered exchanges slowing as they became aware that the conversation had changed its trajectory. Emma's fingers rested lightly on the letter, the edges slightly curled from being carried tightly, and she let her calm composure radiate outward, filling the space with a quiet authority that contradicted her youth and the casual way she had stepped into the room only moments before. She moved her eyes across the assembled crowd, noting the subtle gestures of disbelief and curiosity, the way one hand lightly tapped a gold-rimmed glass, the soft shuffle of feet across polished marble. Her voice, measured and deliberate, cut through the murmurs, providing context without raising its volume. "These documents show every contribution, every decision my mother made that guided this family through challenges you may never understand." The letters on the paper glinted faintly under the overhead light, catching the attention of a guest near the corner who leaned closer, squinting to read the small, precise handwriting that detailed achievements and decisions long unrecognized. Emma's posture remained straight, shoulders back, chin lifted slightly, a subtle yet commanding presence that drew the room's focus toward her and the story she carried. Victoria's hand, previously resting confidently on the arm of the leather chair, moved slightly, fingers curling inward as the weight of recognition began to settle. The quiet intensity of the room was punctuated by the occasional sound of crystal lightly clinking or the soft rasp of a guest's breath, all underlined by the distant hum of the mansion's climate system, a reminder that life continued even as a revelation unfolded. Emma continued, voice calm but carrying the weight of undeniable fact. Every milestone, every choice that shaped this home was her vision, her dedication, her foresight. A subtle pause allowed the words to sink, the room taking them in, absorbing the magnitude of what had been overlooked and underestimated. Eyes that had once been skeptical now lingered on the documents and on Emma herself, the young woman embodying the strength of her mother's work, translating past deeds into present recognition. Victoria's face slowly changed, disbelief giving way to reflection, a subtle tightening of her lips as she processed the reality presented so plainly in the documents. Guests began to exchange glances, their earlier curiosity now mingled with admiration and respect, their whispers softer, as if the room itself had been rebalanced by a quiet authority. Emma's steady gaze never wavered, scanning each person, letting the truth unfold at its own pace, each breath deliberate, measured, amplifying the sense of calm power she held. The light danced off her hair, the letter, the polished table, highlighting the contrast between her composed demeanor and the stunned expressions around her. She did not raise her voice, did not gesture dramatically, yet every subtle movement, the shift of her weight, the gentle placement of the letter on the marble surface, the lift of her eyes, conveyed clarity, honesty, and command. Victoria leaned back slightly, her earlier confidence now tempered by a dawning understanding. A roomful of witnesses silently acknowledging that what had seemed trivial or dismissible now carried undeniable weight. The air was thick with anticipation, curiosity, and a newfound respect, each guest caught in the moment between revelation and reflection, aware that Emma's calm presence had altered the atmosphere and hinted at consequences that were yet to be fully realized. Victoria Langley's eyes flicked over the document again, the subtle movements of her hand betraying the quiet storm of reconsideration brewing beneath her composed exterior. Emma Carter remained poised, her breathing steady, each inhale and exhale synchronized with the stillness of the room, a calm anchor amidst the growing tension. The letter lay on the marble table, its crisp pages catching the soft overhead light, glinting faintly as a testament to every unrecognized effort her mother had made. Emma's gaze swept across the room once more, noting the subtle reactions, the narrowing of eyes, the slight leaning forward, the hesitant nods, as guests began to connect the dots, understanding the depth of the contribution that had previously been dismissed. A faint murmur traveled across the floor as one of the older family members adjusted the papers, confirming small details that had seemed insignificant before but now told a story of resilience, dedication, and vision. Emma stepped slightly to the side, allowing the soft echo of her words to carry, letting the room absorb the weight of what had been revealed without further comment. Victoria's lips parted imperceptibly, a sign of internal reckoning, her posture shifting subtly as she processed the undeniable evidence before her. The light from the chandelier highlighted the contrast between Emma's calm composure and the subtle unease growing in Victoria, the room itself feeling heavier with the presence of truth made visible. Guests exchanged glances, the soft shuffle of feet and the faint clearing of throats punctuating the stillness, each sound accentuating the gravity of the unfolding revelation. Emma's hands rested lightly on the table, her fingers tracing the edge of the document almost absent-mindedly, yet every small movement communicated confidence, patience, and clarity. A young family friend leaned closer, whispering softly to a neighbor. Their words carried only to the immediate listeners, but enough to ripple through the room, reinforcing the realization that every assumption about Emma's mother had been incomplete, premature, and unjust. Emma's eyes met Victoria's once more, steady, unwavering, a silent challenge embedded in their calm intensity. demonstrating that dignity and truth need no elevation to command attention. The murmurs softened, curiosity replaced by reflection as the room collectively considered the ramifications, the subtle power dynamics recalibrating in real time. The soft ambient sounds of the mansion, the faint hum of air, the delicate clinking of silverware in distant rooms, the quiet scratch of pen on paper, seemed amplified against the tense backdrop, each minute auditory detail reinforcing the suspense. Emma's presence, measured and deliberate, transformed the atmosphere, shifting perception from dismissal to acknowledgment, from disregard to attentiveness. Every eye remained fixed, every subtle movement recorded and processed as Emma's quiet authority guided the room through the revelation of truth without a single raised voice, dramatic gesture, or overt demand for recognition, leaving the mansion suspended in the delicate balance between acknowledgment and unfolding consequence. The next chapter hanging tantalizingly in the air, unspoken but deeply felt. Emma Carter's gaze lingered on the subtle expressions of the guests as they absorbed the full meaning of the documents, the quiet rustle of papers, and the soft clinking of glasses punctuating the room's tense silence. She took a measured step back, allowing the space between her and Victoria Langley to carry the weight of acknowledgement without a single raised voice, the polished marble under her shoes reflecting the soft chandelier glow. Each person in the room seemed suspended in thought, the gentle hum of the mansion's air system filling the quiet, as if amplifying the gravity of what had been revealed. Emma's hands rested lightly on the edge of the table, her fingers tracing the smooth surface almost unconsciously, a subtle demonstration of her composure and control. The light shifted across the room, highlighting the delicate shadows cast by the ornate furniture and the intricate patterns of the rug beneath, each visual detail reinforcing the cinematic stillness. Guests leaned slightly forward, their expressions a mixture of realization and intrigue, as Emma's calm presence continued to command attention. Victoria's lips pressed together, eyes narrowing just enough to betray the internal reconsideration of the assertions made, her posture subtly adjusting as the air of quiet authority settled into the space. Emma's breathing remained steady, even, each exhale almost imperceptible, yet harmonizing with the subdued rhythm of the room, reinforcing the weight of her words through presence rather than volume. She glanced briefly at a side table where a small stack of family records lay, the soft edges catching the light, a tangible reminder of the history and effort behind her mother's legacy. The room, filled with the gentle rustle of paper and faint whispers, seemed to hold its collective breath as the implications sank in, every eye now acutely aware of the shift in dynamics. Emma's stance was unwavering, a quiet testament to the fact that confidence and clarity can command respect without confrontation. The subtle sounds of movement, shuffling feet, a soft chair creak, the faint murmur of a conversation paused, amplified the tension, each noise marking the ongoing recalibration of the room's perception. Emma's focus remained sharp, her eyes briefly meeting those of each guest, communicating assurance and integrity, letting them sense the depth of the truth she represented. Victoria's expression softened imperceptibly, her rigid confidence giving way to a tentative acknowledgment, the weight of prior judgments subtly lifting. Emma allowed herself a slight, composed breath, the faint scent of polished wood and subtle fragrance filling the air, grounding her in the calm authority she had cultivated in the moment. Each subtle gesture, the careful placement of her hands, the measured pacing of her steps, the quiet tilt of her head, communicated control, clarity, and purpose, reinforcing the realization among the guests that the narrative of the family's worth was more complex than initially perceived. The soft ambient sounds of the mansion, the delicate tap of a glass, the low hum of ventilation, the muted rustle of papers, enhanced the cinematic quality of the scene, giving every motion, glance, and breath significance. Emma's composed demeanor, unshaken by the lingering tension, projected a quiet command that made it unmistakably clear that the unfolding story was not only being told but understood, the room collectively aware that the next moments would determine the full acknowledgement of what had been hidden in plain sight, leaving anticipation hanging delicately in the air. Emma Carter's hands hovered over the letter for a brief moment before she gently picked it up, feeling the weight of her mother's words pressed into each page. She allowed herself a quiet pause, letting the tension of the room settle and the soft reflections from the chandelier play across the polished marble floor. Every guest remained still, their eyes tracing her movements as if the air itself carried the gravity of what she was about to say. The faint hum of the mansion's ventilation system underscored the silence, amplifying the subtle sound of her breath and the gentle rustle of paper. Emma's voice, calm and deliberate, filled the space without rising. These details reflect the careful guidance and foresight that have always shaped this family, often unnoticed but always present. The words hung in the air, allowing the guests to process, the soft glint of the letter under the overhead lights emphasizing the tangible proof of her mother's diligence. Victoria Langley's posture stiffened slightly, a quiet indication that the gravity of Emma's statement had begun to settle, and the polished surface of the table reflected the complex interplay of light and shadow, highlighting the contrasting reactions across the room. Emma moved with measured intent, her gaze sweeping over each person, noting the subtle expressions of surprise, the slight inclinations of heads, the whispered acknowledgment from one side of the room to the other, all of which reinforced the weight of her presence and the credibility of the claim. The atmosphere felt suspended, every subtle sound, the shift of a chair, the soft clearing of a throat, the gentle tapping of a foot, becoming more pronounced against the backdrop of the mansion's quiet elegance. Emma's stance remained composed, her chin lifted, her shoulders squared, conveying confidence and control without any overt gesture, letting the power of truth and integrity speak for itself. Guests leaned subtly closer, curiosity and realization intertwining, their expressions a delicate blend of reflection and recognition. Victoria's lips tightened as she processed the undeniable weight of the evidence, the initial bravado giving way to contemplative restraint, each subtle movement conveying internal reckoning without a word. The ambient lighting glinted off crystal fixtures, the delicate reflection on the polished surfaces casting intricate patterns across the room, enhancing the cinematic tension and amplifying the impact of Emma's presence. She allowed her eyes to linger briefly on Victoria, conveying both clarity and patience, the unspoken understanding that the narrative was no longer controlled by dismissive assumptions but anchored in truth. Each breath, each subtle movement of Emma's hands, each precise step she took around the room reinforced the sense of quiet authority, ensuring the gathering absorbed every nuance of the revelation. The soft echo of her words and the tangible presence of the letter transformed the atmosphere, shifting perception and subtly rebalancing the dynamics of power within the mansion. Guests remained attentive, the quiet suspense creating a cinematic cadence, as the room collectively recognized that the story of the family's worth was unfolding in real time, and that the implications of Emma's calm authority would continue to ripple through every attentive observer, leaving anticipation poised delicately for what would come next. Emma Carter's voice remained calm, yet firm as she took a deliberate step closer to the center of the room, her eyes meeting those of Victoria Langley with a quiet certainty that seemed to ripple through the gathered guests. The soft chandeliers above cast a warm glow across the polished hardwood floors and the intricate patterns of the Persian rug beneath, each reflective surface emphasizing the stillness and tension that had settled. The letter in Emma's hand glimmered subtly as she shifted it slightly, catching the light just enough to draw the attention of the guests who had begun to murmur softly amongst themselves, their whispers restrained by the palpable gravity of the situation. Emma continued, her tone steady, measured, each word chosen to convey clarity without the need for force. Every decision, every careful step my mother took, is here, documented and undeniable, guiding the family with foresight you might not have noticed. The subtle sound of papers rustling under her fingertips seemed amplified in the quiet, punctuating her statement with an almost cinematic rhythm. Victoria's posture adjusted minutely, her hand brushing the arm of the leather chair as a faint tightening in her jaw revealed her growing contemplation, the earlier bravado replaced by a flicker of respect and uncertainty. Emma's gaze shifted briefly to the guests, acknowledging their curiosity without breaking her composed stance, her eyes reflecting both calm assurance and a hint of the emotion that had driven her to stand there. The air in the room felt charged, each subtle movement, the gentle shuffle of a foot, the soft intake of breath from a nearby guest, the faint click of a crystal glass, adding to the layered tension. Emma's presence, composed and deliberate, held the room's focus entirely, guiding attention to the tangible evidence of her mother's impact without raising her voice or resorting to dramatic gestures. A guest leaned forward slightly, carefully examining the pages, their expression transitioning from curiosity to recognition, understanding the depth of the contributions and decisions made over years that had shaped the household. The soft interplay of light and shadow across the room accentuated the cinematic feel, highlighting the contrast between Emma's calm authority and the subtle unease growing within Victoria, whose eyes now flickered over the documents with a dawning realization. Emma allowed a brief pause, her breathing steady, as if giving the room time to fully absorb the implications, the quiet hum of the mansion's climate system underscoring the suspense. Each glance she cast, each subtle shift in posture, reinforced the sense of measured power and integrity she projected, signaling that control and respect could be commanded without loud words or overt displays. The guests remained attentive, leaning slightly as if drawn into the narrative, their reactions a mix of surprise, reflection, and appreciation for the quiet strength Emma embodied. The soft ambient sounds, the faint creak of a chair, the distant murmur of conversation halted in anticipation, the subtle glint of light on polished surfaces, enhanced the tension, providing a rhythmic backdrop to the unfolding recognition. Emma's composed stance and careful pacing guided the atmosphere, drawing every eye toward the tangible story in her hands and her unwavering presence, leaving the room suspended in a delicate balance of revelation and anticipation, each observer silently acknowledging that the next moments would further define the shift in understanding and respect that she had quietly instigated. Emma Carter took a deliberate breath, the faint scent of polished wood and subtle floral perfume lingering in the grand mansion as the tension shifted ever so slightly in her favor. Her gaze swept the room once more, noting the way each guest now leaned slightly forward, their expressions softening with curiosity and a dawning respect that had not been there before. The soft clink of crystal on marble and the gentle hum of the mansion's climate system accentuated the quiet, giving rhythm to the suspended anticipation that filled the air. Emma moved a step closer to the center of the room, her hand resting lightly on the edge of the marble table, brushing the corner of the letter, its pages glinting under the warm chandelier light. Her voice, calm and measured, carried without force, yet filled every corner of the expansive space. These papers are more than words. They are proof of dedication, vision, and unwavering commitment that have shaped the path of this family for decades. Guests turned their heads toward the documents, eyes scanning lines that spoke of decisions, sacrifices, and careful guidance that had been overlooked. Victoria Langley's expression shifted imperceptibly, a slight furrow in her brow and a subtle tilt of her head signaling the beginning of acknowledgment, the earlier smirk replaced by a contemplative stillness. Emma allowed a brief pause, letting the significance of her words settle, the ambient light reflecting off the polished surfaces to highlight the contrast between her composed figure and the growing weight of understanding in the room. A guest whispered softly to another, the words carried through the hushed air like ripples, further amplifying the sense that perceptions were changing with each passing second. Emma's posture remained straight and controlled, her shoulders relaxed, her chin lifted just enough to convey quiet authority, the room attuned to her presence without a single raised hand or heightened tone. Victoria's eyes flicked between the pages and Emma herself, the subtle unease in her demeanor mirrored by the growing attentiveness of the assembly. The soft sounds of shifting feet, the delicate scrape of a chair, and the faint rustle of papers provided a rhythmic cadence that heightened the cinematic quality of the scene, emphasizing the shift in perception. Emma's composed movement, the deliberate positioning of her hands, and her careful pacing reinforced the integrity and weight of the truth she carried, each gesture measured, precise, and resonant. The collective focus of the room had fully transferred to her, and every subtle reaction, the tightening of lips, the soft inhalation of breath, the slight widening of eyes, spoke to the impact of her calm confidence. Light reflected off the chandelier and crystal accents, illuminating the intricate textures of the furniture and the polished surfaces, amplifying the quiet drama as Emma's unwavering presence guided the room through the unfolding recognition. Her eyes met Victoria's with steady clarity, communicating patience, understanding, and an unspoken challenge. Each person in the room absorbing the shift in dynamics as the narrative of truth, respect, and acknowledgement began to fully take hold, leaving the mansion suspended in a moment of silent transformation. The next revelation poised delicately in the air and charged with anticipation for what would come next. Emma Carter stepped back slightly, letting her calm energy fill the room as the soft light from the chandelier glinted off the polished surfaces, casting delicate reflections across the walls and marble floors. The guests remained quietly attentive, their eyes flicking between the letter in her hand and the expression on Victoria Langley's face, a mixture of contemplation and dawning acknowledgement now replacing the earlier smugness. Emma's breathing was even, controlled, as she adjusted the angle of the letter slightly to let the subtle shine of the ink catch the ambient light, a gentle yet purposeful signal of transparency and truth. A faint murmur ran through the room as some guests quietly began reading the details themselves, their eyes widening as they traced the meticulous records of decisions, foresight, and careful planning her mother had accomplished over the years. Emma allowed the pause to linger, her gaze sweeping the crowd with quiet assurance, silently communicating patience, clarity, and composure. Victoria's lips pressed together. As she processed the implications, the rigid posture softening imperceptibly, her fingers tightening then relaxing on the leather arm of her chair. The mansion seemed to exhale collectively, each soft sound, the subtle shuffle of a shoe, the whisper of a guest leaning closer, the faint tap of a glass, amplifying the significance of the moment and enhancing the cinematic quality of the atmosphere. Emma's eyes met those of the closest observers, her calm, steady demeanor conveying a message that words alone could not. Truth and integrity command recognition without force. She took a subtle step to the side, letting the room's attention focus fully on the documents and the undeniable evidence of her mother's contributions, each fold of paper and handwritten note underscoring decades of diligence and vision. The ambient reflections from crystal and polished wood highlighted the contrasts of light and shadow, mirroring the subtle shifts in perception among the guests, whose expressions slowly transitioned from doubt to acknowledgement, from curiosity to respect. Emma's posture remained unwavering, her chin lifted slightly, shoulders squared, communicating authority and presence without raising her voice, letting the impact of her words and the tangible evidence speak for themselves. The air seemed charged, each observer acutely aware of the nuanced dynamics unfolding, the delicate balance of acknowledgement and recalibrated perception rippling through the room. Emma's breathing remained quiet and rhythmic, a counterpoint to the soft ambient sounds, the hum of ventilation, the subtle echo of movement across the floor, the gentle rustle of paper, each contributing to the tension and resonance of the scene. Guests began to subtly shift, leaning forward to glimpse details they might have missed, murmuring softly among themselves, the quiet intensity of Emma's presence compelling attention and thought. Victoria's gaze flickered across the room, absorbing the silent acknowledgement from the surrounding guests, her posture slowly opening as a tentative recognition of the truth began to emerge. Emma allowed herself a measured, composed exhale, the faint scent of polished wood and subtle floral notes grounding the moment as she remained the steady center of the room's attention. The atmosphere, rich with subtle visual and auditory cues, seemed to hold its collective breath, suspended in a cinematic pause where the truth had begun to fully reshape perceptions, and the anticipation of what would follow hung delicately in the air, every guest conscious of the quiet transformation unfolding before them. Emma Carter's eyes lingered on Victoria Langley as the soft tension in the room deepened, the ambient chandelier light casting warm highlights across the polished marble floors and ornate furniture. Guests held their breath, leaning slightly forward, their attention fully captured by the measured, calm presence Emma exuded. She moved her hand slowly, placing the letter flat on the table with deliberate care, the faint rustle of the paper amplified by the hushed silence that enveloped the space. Her voice remained steady, each word chosen with precision. Every action my mother took was guided by foresight, dedication, and an unwavering commitment to this family. The impact of her decisions is here, undeniable and clear. The gentle reflections of light on crystal glasses and silver accents danced across the room, highlighting the subtle expressions of surprise and realization spreading among the guests. Emma's gaze swept the room, observing the shifting dynamics as the quiet authority she projected reshaped the attention of every individual present. Victoria's lips pressed together, a barely perceptible inhale betraying the dawning acknowledgment of the facts before her, while her posture shifted, relaxing the previous rigidity into contemplative stillness. The soft ambient sounds of the mansion, the faint hum of ventilation, a chair being adjusted, the muted scratch of a pen, created a rhythm that underscored the cinematic quality of the moment, each subtle auditory cue amplifying the significance of the revelation. Emma allowed the weight of her calm authority to settle, her chin lifted slightly, shoulders squared, her presence commanding attention without a single raised hand or elevated tone. The guests leaned in, whispering softly to each other, the murmurs blending with the gentle reflections of light to create an atmosphere thick with anticipation and respect. Each glance she cast, each careful step she took across the room, reinforced the integrity and clarity she carried, demonstrating that calm confidence and undeniable truth can shift perception without confrontation. Victoria's eyes flickered from the letter to Emma, her expression softening, her hands resting lightly on the armrests as she processed the undeniable evidence, the subtle nuances of her posture reflecting the internal reconsideration unfolding. The soft glow from the chandeliers highlighted every detail, from the folds of the rug to the edges of the ornate furniture, emphasizing the cinematic tension of the scene as Emma's presence gently dominated the space. Every observer felt the change in energy, the quiet shift from dismissal to acknowledgment, the room collectively, registering that the narrative of the family's worth had been irrevocably reframed. Emma's breathing remained calm and rhythmic, each measured inhale and exhale anchoring the moment as the mansion seemed suspended in the subtle power of quiet revelation. The guests' reactions ranged from wide-eyed realization to contemplative nods, the whispered acknowledgments threading through the air, reinforcing that Emma's calm, deliberate, and undeniable truth had begun to reshape the entire atmosphere, leaving anticipation poised delicately for the next unfolding moment, the unspoken question of recognition and consequence hanging in the soft, reflective light that bathed the room. Emma Carter felt the room's energy shift subtly as Victoria Langley leaned back slightly, her eyes tracing the pages of the letter with renewed attention. The soft hum of the mansion's ventilation system filled the otherwise quiet space, emphasizing the stillness as guests absorbed the weight of the revelations laid before them. Emma's movements were deliberate, her fingers gently adjusting the edges of the paper to catch the chandelier's glow, highlighting the fine handwriting and intricate details that chronicled her mother's foresight and careful planning. She spoke again, calm and measured, allowing each word to resonate without haste. These records show decades of decisions, carefully made, preserving the integrity and vision of this family, often unnoticed but never absent. The polished floors reflected the ambient light, casting subtle patterns that danced across the room, as if echoing the unfolding realization. Guests shifted subtly, their attention sharpening, leaning in to examine both Emma's composed presence and the documents that substantiated her claim. Victoria's lips pressed together as she processed the undeniable evidence, her shoulders relaxing slightly, a subtle acknowledgment forming in her expression as the previous tension gave way to contemplation. Emma's breathing remained steady, each inhalation and exhalation reinforcing the calm authority she projected, allowing the room to absorb her presence and the truth it carried. The soft shuffle of feet and the quiet murmur of whispered recognition traveled through the space, mixing with the faint clinking of crystal glasses and the gentle rustle of papers, adding a rhythmic texture to the scene. Emma's posture, upright and composed, her chin slightly lifted, projected confidence and integrity without a single overt gesture, commanding respect through presence alone. The room's light caught on the edges of the letter, glinting softly, emphasizing the tangible proof of careful dedication that Emma's words articulated, compelling attention without force. Each guest's expression evolved subtly, from curiosity to understanding, from skepticism to appreciation, as the calm, deliberate authority of her demeanor illuminated the previously overlooked contributions of her mother. Victoria's eyes met Emma's for a moment, a faint narrowing and gentle flicker revealing an internal processing of truth, her rigid stance softening as the acknowledgment became more palpable. The ambient reflections on the polished furniture, the delicate glimmer from crystal accents, and the warmth of the chandelier light together amplified the cinematic quality, heightening the perception of a pivotal moment in real time. Emma allowed a measured pause, letting the collective silence stretch, reinforcing the weight of every carefully chosen word and deliberate action. The room seemed to lean forward, collectively holding breath and attention as the truth fully resonated. Subtle sounds, the light shift of a chair, the quiet rustle of paper, the soft intake of breath, marking the ongoing recalibration of awareness and respect. Her calm presence, unwavering gaze, and precise articulation ensured that every individual absorbed the significance of the moment, the quiet revelation reshaping perception, and the mansion itself seemed suspended in the subtle power of acknowledgment, poised delicately for the next unfolding consequences of the truth she had revealed. Victoria Langley's gaze fell to the letter again, her hands slightly trembling as the weight of realization began to settle in her chest. The room was still, the ambient glow of the chandelier reflecting softly on the marble floor and polished wood surfaces, every object amplified in clarity by the silence. Emma Carter's posture remained upright, composed, her calm presence radiating confidence that contrasted with the subtle uncertainty creeping into Victoria's demeanor. The gentle hum of the mansion's ventilation system underscored the tension, each soft sound, the faint shuffle of a shoe, the slight creak of a chair, the delicate rustle of paper, accentuating the cinematic stillness. Emma's voice, measured and deliberate, cut through the quiet with precise clarity. The dedication, foresight, and integrity my mother maintained throughout every decision have shaped the path of this family, guiding it even when recognition was absent. Guests leaned slightly forward, their expressions a mix of surprise, acknowledgment, and quiet admiration, the subtle interplay of light on crystal glasses and reflective surfaces emphasizing their shifting awareness. Victoria's lips pressed together, her brow furrowing as she absorbed the undeniable truth, the previously unchallenged confidence softening into contemplative reflection. Emma's gaze swept the room, capturing the reactions of each guest, noting the small movements, a nod, a widened eye, a soft intake of breath, that collectively revealed the growing acknowledgment of the evidence she presented. The polished floor reflected the chandelier's glow, creating an intricate pattern that seemed to mirror the layered dynamics unfolding within the room. Emma adjusted the letter gently, letting the light catch the ink in a way that emphasized the meticulous detail and careful documentation of her mother's contributions, each movement deliberate and controlled, a subtle demonstration of authority without force. The room held its breath, the quiet murmur of recognition passing softly from one guest to another, amplifying the sense of revelation and the recalibration of understanding. Emma's hands rested lightly on the table, her fingers tracing the smooth edge with minimal movement, each subtle gesture reinforcing the quiet power of her presence. Victoria's eyes lingered on Emma, the faintest hesitation and shifting expression betraying the internal reckoning, the acknowledgment of previously dismissed efforts settling like a slow tide across her features. Guests continued to observe in respectful silence, their attention fixed on the interplay of calm authority and undeniable truth, each subtle sound, the faint brushing of fabric, a soft breath, the whisper of a shifting foot, contributing to the suspenseful cadence of the moment. Emma allowed a small pause, her composed breathing amplifying the room's focus, her calm yet assertive presence directing attention without need for overt gestures. The chandelier's light danced across the room, glinting off polished surfaces and crystal accents, emphasizing the cinematic tension as the room collectively processed the weight of revelation. Emma's eyes met Victoria's once more, conveying quiet authority, clarity, and patience, the subtle power of truth unspoken yet fully understood, leaving the mansion suspended in a delicate balance of recognition, reflection, and anticipation of what would unfold next as the narrative of dedication and integrity reached its pivotal shift. Emma Carter allowed a subtle, controlled smile to cross her face as the room absorbed the culmination of her words and the undeniable clarity of the documents she held. The chandelier overhead cast soft, shifting reflections across the marble floor, the polished furniture, and the attentive faces of the guests, emphasizing the quiet gravity that had settled throughout the mansion. Each person seemed to lean imperceptibly forward, the soft ambient hum of the mansion's climate system filling the spaces between breaths, enhancing the cinematic pause that hung in the air. Emma gently adjusted the angle of the letter, the light catching the ink in a way that highlighted the meticulous record of foresight, guidance, and steadfast dedication her mother had demonstrated over the years. Her voice, calm yet resonant, filled the room without needing to rise in volume. The legacy we see, the stability and vision that have allowed this family to thrive, is the result of careful thought, integrity, and unwavering commitment that cannot be ignored. The subtle glint of crystal glasses and silver accents reflected the soft light, emphasizing the attentive focus of the guests as they quietly absorbed the truth. Victoria Langley's expression shifted, the initial shock softened into reflective consideration, her hands resting lightly on the arms of her chair as the realization of her prior misjudgment took hold. Emma's posture remained composed and deliberate, her chin slightly lifted, shoulders squared, radiating the quiet authority that had guided the room's collective attention. The soft shuffle of feet, the gentle rustle of papers, and the faint tap of a glass punctuated the space, each sound contributing to the tension and cinematic cadence of the moment. Guests leaned subtly, murmuring to one another in hushed tones as the significance of the revelation unfolded, a gradual recognition of previously overlooked contributions washing over the assembly. Emma's eyes moved across the room, taking in the shifting expressions, the subtle nods, the widened eyes, and the soft exhalations, reinforcing the understanding that the truth she carried had reshaped the perception of authority and respect within the space. Victoria's gaze lingered on Emma, a quiet acknowledgment forming in the subtle changes of her expression, the softening of her posture, and the faint relaxation of previously rigid muscles, signaling an internal reconciliation with the facts presented. The interplay of light and shadow from the chandeliers and polished surfaces accentuated the cinematic atmosphere, highlighting every small movement and reinforcing the quiet drama of the moment. Emma allowed herself a slow, deliberate exhale, her calm breathing establishing a measured rhythm that seemed to anchor the room, guiding attention and reflection without a single overt gesture. The ambient sounds, the hum of ventilation, the soft rustle of paper, the delicate shifting of furniture, combined with the focused gaze of the guests to create a suspended, cinematic stillness, a moment where acknowledgment and understanding had taken precedence over words and force. Emma's presence, composed, deliberate, and steady, communicated authority and clarity, the quiet assurance of truth resonating through every attentive gaze, leaving the mansion poised in a delicate, cinematic equilibrium. The room collectively acknowledging that the narrative of integrity and dedication had reached its full, undeniable expression and that the impact of the revelation would continue to shape perceptions long after the quiet had settled. Emma Carter finally allowed herself a small, composed smile as the atmosphere of the mansion shifted subtly, the soft glow of the chandelier casting warm, intricate reflections across the polished marble floors and the attentive faces of the guests. The letter rested on the table, its pages now fully recognized for the detailed record of foresight, dedication, and unwavering integrity that her mother had maintained, each word resonating with truth that could not be denied. Victoria Langley's posture had softened completely, her hands resting lightly on the armrests, a faint nod acknowledging the depth of understanding that had spread through the room. The gentle hum of the mansion's ventilation system filled the quiet spaces between breaths, emphasizing the suspended tension and cinematic stillness of the scene. Guests whispered softly among themselves, leaning in subtly to observe the evidence, their expressions reflecting realization, respect, and quiet admiration as Emma's calm authority guided their perceptions. Emma's movements were minimal yet deliberate. She adjusted the angle of the letter slightly, letting the light catch the ink to highlight the meticulous planning and thoughtful decisions documented across the pages. Her eyes scanned the room, capturing the nuances of every gaze, every subtle shift in expression, ensuring that the acknowledgment of truth spread evenly, silently, and thoroughly among the observers. Victoria's lips pressed together in a thoughtful pause, the subtle relaxation of her shoulders conveying an unspoken reconciliation with the previously dismissed contributions, and her eyes reflected a newfound respect for both Emma and her mother. The soft reflections on crystal, polished wood, and silver accents amplified the cinematic weight of the moment, each flicker of light marking the unfolding understanding within the room. Emma took a measured step back, her chin held high, her posture conveying quiet dignity and composed authority as the guests collectively registered the shift in perception, the subtle power dynamics now realigned in recognition of integrity and careful stewardship. The ambient sounds, the faint scrape of a chair, the soft shift of fabric, the quiet intake of breath, punctuated the stillness, each subtle cue, reinforcing the gravity of the revelation. Emma's calm presence, steady breathing, and deliberate gestures ensured that the significance of her mother's legacy was communicated fully, leaving no room for dismissal or doubt. Victoria's gaze lingered on Emma, silently acknowledging the quiet strength and unwavering clarity she projected, a subtle signal that understanding and respect had been fully established. The room collectively absorbed the moment, the mansion itself seeming to hold its breath, suspended in the delicate interplay of light, shadow, and quiet revelation. Emma allowed her eyes to soften slightly, a hint of satisfaction and composure radiating through her stance, the story of integrity, foresight, and dedication now fully recognized by all present. Every subtle movement, glance, and reflection contributed to a cinematic tableau where acknowledgment had replaced dismissal, understanding had replaced doubt, and the quiet, deliberate power of truth had reshaped the perceptions of every observer in the grand, softly lit space, leaving an open sense of reflection and anticipation for what the future recognition and appreciation of her mother's legacy would bring.